leveling the effect of pressure on the level of liquid columns, and how do we ensure that we will be able to take the measure the pressure, and then we have solved some problems, and then what are the different problems that we face with YouTube manometers also we have seen, and then we have moved on to the calibration gauge, which we call it as dead weight tester. We have spent considerable amount of time, and I hope have understood what it is. And here we are seeing what are the factors that will affect the accuracy of a dead weight tester, as local gravity. If your aligning position is not proper, what will happen? The pressure coefficient. So the dead weight tester, if it changes with respect to the piston area with respect to pressure and temperature, if it expands or contracts, that will have an effect that is called as pressure coefficient. Leveling of the instrument, which is so important. If you are not leveling it perfectly horizontally, then also there is bound to have some errors that will creep into the measurement. So pressure measurement. So, and tear force, which is basically force error in the determination of mass of weight. So if you are not uh, properly measuring the mass of the weights, so and if you are not taking care of the calculation of the piston, cylinder, and carrier weight, are a known characteristic of the dead weight tester, then automatically whatever the error that comes into the force, that will be representing the tear force. And then we have air buoyancy. Air buoyancy is basically buoyancy force. Whatever the air pressure and humidity, they always have the effect on the density of air, which actually kind of give an error while lifting force to the date. So gravity and buoyancy are the two important factors which actually has to be taken care of. Surface tension forces. Surface tension forces are another important thing. Thermal expansion, as I already discussed, so thermal expansion of pressure will have its own effect. Height difference. So wherever you are calibrating it, if you are not using that in the same place, so the calibration has to be taken place wherever the measurement is taking place. Otherwise, the height difference will have an effect on the measurement. So these are considerable factors which are actually affecting the pressure measurement. This we have seen, and then we have moved on to the dynamic response of a pressure measurement system. Initially, if you are giving if you are measuring the pressure with a YouTube manometer, we have taken a very simple case where how do you want to design the YouTube manometer, depending on what are the factors that you have to take into care for attaining the steady state very quickly. So we have taken the dynamic response of the pressure measurement system. Similar kind of analysis will be done for any other measurement system to find out the relevant dynamic characteristics of that particular pressure measurement system, or temperature measurement, whatever it is. So for every measurement system, we will always look at the steady state part as well as the dynamic part also. So it helps us uh, to optimize the system for attaining the steady state very quickly, so that you'll be able to take care of the readings properly. So here we are talking about the transient response and what is the basic factors which affect the transient responses we have defined, and then we have written a mathematical energy balance equation like this, and then from that energy equation, what we find out is we have found out that a particular equation, what we call it as the governing equation, and from the governing equation, we have arrived to a conclusion that the how this how this dynamic response will behave with respect to the damping coefficient. If you are not, if it is under damped, then what happens is your output will oscillate a bit above the mean, and then it takes time to settle down. And if it is over damped, then it takes a long time to get a steady state. But if the value will not oscillate, it will be a steady increase. So if it is critically damped, then the fluctuations will be lesser, but it takes some time to actually settle down. But that is the best for the device. So we'll always look at we always try to look at the critical damping of the system for having a better response. And then we have some more problems which we have done. And then some extra topics I thought of giving you. For example, Bourdon tube pressure gauge, we have gone through it properly. And then bellows tube gauge, we have looked at. So what is happening with the bellows tube is, bellows tube helps us to protect the device from the overloads. That means sudden flow or any sudden overload will actually damage the device. So what we are trying
Excuse
to
me,
do?
sir.
Yes,
Sir, are you changing the slide, sir?
absolutely. It's not changing.
No, it's
Sir,
not
it's
changing.
still in sixth slides.
So what were you doing all the time? So do you think that I will keep on teaching the same slide without showing anything? Should tell me upfront, right? The problem is if I share my window, somehow this is not changing anything. It is an issue. Okay. So we have discussed this particular curve, and then we have moved on to the various other pressure measuring devices like Bourdon tube pressure gauge. We have looked at it, and then we have also looked at the bellows pressure gauge, and then LVDTs, how we use, and LVDTs will once again come in temperature measurement. So where we are by a movement of displacement of the conductor in a three primary winding coils, depending on the variation in the currents, we will be able to find out the displacement, and the displacement is directly proportional to the pressure. So based on these principle, I was also talking about the diaphragm. What I was trying to tell you is a diaphragm will directly block the flow the flow or the high impact fluid to enter into the system. Instead, it actually elongates because of the pressure. The diaphragm, whatever the layer that you are keeping, that actually elongates, and that elongation will be sent to the by a suitable mechanism to the pointer. So from there, you are able to detect the pressure. The important feature of this diaphragm bellows, diaphragm gauges are they protect the instrument from higher loads because they directly the fluid will not influence the pressure measurement. It impacts the layer that is in between these pointer as well as this small mechanism will be there. So what happens is this fluid will directly hit the diaphragm, and the diaphragm displaces, and the displacement will be transferred to the pointer through suitable mechanism. So this is all we have already looked at in the previous class. So if you look at the previous class sessions, you will be able to understand. But we are not going to give in that those things in the exam. Bellows also you have seen how to measure the bellows and all. You have seen that. Those are all the advanced instruments that we'll be using in the industry. Right. Now let us move on to the next topic, which is very important: vacuum pressure measurement system. So if you look at the vacuum pressure measurement system, as we have discussed earlier, what will happen if you use a vacuum measurement system? How do we measure the vacuum measurement system? Suppose if you have a U-tube manometer, for example, like this. So we just imagine that U-tube manometer. And if this is a pressure P, that is, this pressure P is greater than the atmospheric pressure. Okay, P is greater than P atmospheric. What will happen? What will happen? The layer here will be down. So there is a pushing of this liquid in the left limb compared to the right limb when pressure is higher. For example, if it is a if it is a vacuum pressure, what happens? What is the estimation that we can get? Less than P atmosphere. Now it is visible, right? I hope it is visible.
Yes, sir, it is
Yes,
visible.
sir.
So now what is the expectation now? On which side the liquid layer will be higher and which side it will be lower?
On the opposite sides to the first
So that
case.
means on the left side we will have a higher, and then this side it will be, this is, let us say this is P vacuum, wherever we are calculating, and on the right side P, which is at open to the atmosphere. So what, depending on this height will vary. So this is the simplest principle that we use for measuring the vacuum. Here we have a manometric liquid, We have this pressure, air atmospheric pressure that is acting, and is directly connected with the vacuum. So the problem, as I have talked about, suppose if I'm connecting this with a pipe or chamber, which is for which I am finding out the vacuum, it has to be foolproof. That means it has to be sealed properly. That is the disadvantage with this. Even the slightest uh, missealing or what we call misalignment will allow the flow to pass through it and varying the vacuum, because vacuum is here and the around surrounding is air. So proper sealing is required for measuring these kind of devices. So that is the basic problem with vacuum pressure measurement. Okay, so proper sealing has to be there to make sure that the evacuation is proper. Evacuation pressure can be measured properly. The first and foremost important device that we use mostly in industry as well as academia is the McLeod gauge. Okay, so McLeod gauge. Now, what is the principle in McLeod gauge? First, I will explain. Later, we will understand. McLeod gauge. What it does is it uses the Boyle's law, or at isothermal condition. What is the Boyle's law says? P1 V1 is equivalent to P2 V2. Okay, so what we do is we will connect this gauge to a pressure which is unknown, which is vacuum pressure or less than atmospheric pressure, and then a known volume of this gas is we are trying to control that volume of air and then compress it with suitable pressure and find out the volume as well as pressure P2. Now we know V1, P2, and V2. Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, nothing is visible, sir.
There is a screen with McLeod gauge, isn't there?
Yes, sir. If you are writing anything,
I have not writing anything. I will just explain.
sorry, sir.
I told you. Huh? So what I am trying to do is I will show you. Don't worry. Huh? What I am trying to tell you is I am taking some gas which is at very low pressure. Okay, a particular volume of gas I am allowing into a particular capillary tube, and then so let us assume that volume of gas is V1, and the pressure, no unknown pressure, is P1. And then what I will do is I know I will try to compress the same volume of the gas. When I'm compressing it, what happens? Its volume will reduce, its pressure will increase, and whatever the rise in the pressure, I will try to measure in the absolute scale as well as the volume. So now what are the things that I know? P1 I don't know, V1 I know, V2 volume 2 also I can measure, P2 in terms of manometric variation if I can measure, then obviously I'll be able to find out P1. That is the basic principle. So let us look at this. So this is the McLeod pressure gauge that we will be using here. So here you can see that there is a reservoir. Now can you see the pointer? My hand cursor is visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now here we have an oil reservoir or a manometric liquid reservoir. So this is the manometric liquid reservoir. And we also have a tubing that is connecting it to one. This is a bulb. This whole thing is called as a bulb. And the top portion is a capillary tube. And the bottom portion is a capillary tube. And this point is very important that we calling it as an observer point O. And then this is connected to another capillary tube. That the area of this capillary tube and this tube, they both are same. And we have this kind of a connection, channel connection, and there is a bigger tube over here, bigger diameter tube over here, and this tube is directly connected to the unknown pressure. So that means that this pressure is what I am measuring. Whatever the device for which I am finding out the vacuum pressure, that side we are connecting to this. Okay, and this can be lowered or taken into height. Now with McLeod gauge, first we will see we can measure this up to 10 power minus 6 star, which is nothing but 133.322 Newton per meter square. It is invented by Herbert McLeod in 74. Now, looking at the principle, as I told you, we are entrapping some unknown pressure gas into a very small volume. This volume can be measured because there is a height h, and the small diameter we know, therefore area we will know. So area into h will give you the volume.
Sir, you're muted, sir.
Is it audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know why it is happening. So I think this the screen is visible now, right?
Yes, sir, visible.
Yes, sir.
So now the principle, we will talk about the principle. Yeah, the principle, what we are finding is, we are trying to find out a compressing a known volume of the low pressure gas. So this low pressure gas that enters into the tube, for which I need to find out, let us say this pressure is P1. And a V1 known amount of this volume of gas freely I am entrapping into a tube, and up to this point I'm entrapping it into a tube up to this. So I know the volume of this whole pipe along with this circular thing over here, this tank, along with this pipe. I know the total volume of from here to here. So, and then what I'm trying to do is, we know that V1 I know because I am allowing this flow to enter into it. Imagine that this blue color liquid is not there. Initially, the gas is coming into this, and then by moving this particular reservoir to the higher position, I'm trying to put this liquid, manometric liquid, and therefore this whatever the entered fluid inside the tube, I'm trying to compress this from this volume from here to this volume. Okay, so because of this, what happens, there is the volume change in the same gas P2. The volume is changed, that is volume is reduced, but pressure is increased. And what is that pressure difference? I will, because this is allowed to move freely in this tube. Here there is a gas. Therefore, what is happening is, I can find out the pressure difference between these two. They are supposed to be, because since by movement of this, I made sure that these two are aligned at that reference point. So what is the height difference? This is the pressure P2 in terms of pressure head H. P by rho G is equivalent to H. From this, I will find out P2. From this, I will find out V2. So P1 is not the unknown. V1 initially found out, P1 is unknown. And then I compressed. P2 I'm finding from the height difference. And V2 volume 2, A2 into this height H. You will get that. So by mathematical modeling, by mathematical jugglery, what I will try to find out is, I will try to find out the same thing I am showing here. There is initial pressure of volume V1, and then I'm compressing it. That means volume is reduced and your pressure is increased. Now, the working we will try to find out. A is a capillary tube, B is also a capillary tube of the same area, C is the tube which is connected to the vacuum system. A and B, on B we have some readings to find out the height difference, and now we will see the basic working of this particular system. So this is a movable reservoir. You can see here, what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to decrease the height of the particular system, the mobile reservoir. I'm keeping it downwards. When I keep it downwards, pressure is equivalent to rho GH. As your height is lower from the sea level, your pressure is lower. As you move higher from the sea level, above the sea level, automatically your pressure will increase. So when it is coming down, the fluid you can see here in the reservoir, the liquid is filled. It is at a higher height. And I am trying to control the liquid up to O. The manometric liquid is below the point O, reference point O. And then from the vacuum system, I am allowing the whatever the gas at lower pressure, I am allowing it to fill the whole volume of B, C, and A initially. So now this gas is up to here. I know the volume V1 of this A. I don't know P1 of this capillary. Now what I'll try to do is, now the second part is I'm trying to compress this liquid to a higher pressure but lesser volume. So now what I'm trying to do is, the vacuum system, it is completely filled. You can see here, it's all in gray color. So that means the liquid has entered. And then now by moving this reservoir to this reference height, by moving it to the reference height 0, the gas which is up to here is now compressed to a small volume over here. Okay, small volume over here. Because this is a reference height and this has moved up to this, what is happening? This liquid will rise by the same height. You can see these three levels are in the same thing, except this, because there is a higher pressure gas which is actually giving this. So now the higher pressure I am able to find out with the pressure difference. And from this known higher pressure and the two other volumes, I'm trying to find out the lower pressure, which is before the compression of the gas. That is what I'm trying to find out using Boyle's law. So now you can see here, now it is compressed and there is a difference of height, manometric height h, we will see over here. Okay, so this is the reference line 0. So everything is in the same line, because there is a gap, because there is a gas which is at higher pressure. So this is imparting some manometric head h. So this is the h, head h. Let us take the capillary area as small a. This area is also small a. Now we will try to find out the expressions. V1 is equivalent to volume of the bulb. So this bulb volume, I am taking the volume of the bulb as V1. P1 is the unknown pressure. What I'm trying to say is the whole A along with the bulb, the capillary tube as well as the bulb up to the point O, up to this. This is my V1. P1 is the unknown pressure. When the unknown pressure source occupied this whole thing, that the volume occupied by that gas is nothing but your unknown pressure. And then your P2 is basically this is what I'm talking about. Now you can see here from A to E, from the entrapped gas from through the whole reservoir, this capillary tube as well as a bulb is what makes my V1. And what is this pressure at this is my P1. Now once I moved this reservoir to a next height, known pressure after compression. Once after I compressed it, I found out the height h. So P2 is known. V2 is also known from the same thing, because h is known and the area is known, right? So this small diameter I know, so therefore area pi by 4 d square into h I will know. So from this I will try to find out the mathematical equation according to Boyle's law. P1 V1 is equivalent to P2 V2. Okay, P1 is unknown, V1 we know, we can calculate this. P2 from the manometric head I can find out. V2 similar, A into small h. So V1 we can find, P2 we can find, V2 we can find. So therefore simple thing is P1 equal to P2 into V2 by V1, which we will try to write down in terms of small area A into this h. So that will help us to come to a final equation which is easy to calculate. So now the difference in the level of the two limbs, this, let us say that this is a Newtube manometer kind of a thing. Because of this pressure, what is the manometric head that is happening? That is your h, small h. Okay. Now, continuing this equation, V2 is what? V2 is, let us say, that small area of this particular capillary tube is small a, including this. V2 is pi by 4 d2, this one. Okay, pi by 4 d square or small d square, whatever you take. So this diameter, this area is basically your A into H. That will give you the volume of the entrapped gas, only this part. That is given by A2 into H. Now V2 we know. So what is this H? This H is nothing but the pressure difference between this and this. P2 minus P2 is the higher pressure, P1 is the initial pressure. The manometric head is given by capital P2 minus P1. Therefore, H plus P1 is equivalent to P2, correct? H plus P1 is equivalent to P2. This I can replace, this P2 I can replace with P1 plus H, P1 plus H. V2 I can replace with small a into H. Okay, so that is what I'm writing on. P1 V1 is equivalent to H plus P1 is equivalent to P2. So P2 I have written. H plus P1 is equivalent to P2. V2 is given by this area of the capillary tube into the height H. So this will give you the expression. This will modify the expression to this. Now, if you keep that expression to the, if you converge to P1 values, how this expression will change. So therefore, if you multiply this AH square plus P1 into AH, so P1 is equivalent to AH square by V1 plus P1 by P1 AH by V1. Therefore, here what I'm trying to do is P1 into V1 minus P1 AH, I am writing to the left side, is equivalent to AH square. And therefore, P1 is taken as a common, that is V1 minus AH is equivalent to AH square. Therefore, the pressure P1, which is what I need to find out, the initial unknown pressure, low pressure, P1 is equivalent to the final expression A, small a, which I know from the diameter of the capillary tube, and height H, which we can get from the manometric tube, divided by capital V1. What is capital V1? The total volume of this capillary tube along with the disc or whatever circular thing, conical thing, or whatever it is kept over here. So that is the volume V1 minus this small area into H. Now, when you consider V1 along with AH, V1 is much bigger, isn't it? It's very high, right? This is a small area when you compare to this area. So since V1 is very much greater than AH, taking out AH or without subtracting AH also, my expression becomes maybe little error may come, but that is not significant enough. Okay, so therefore this expression can be written as the unknown source pressure, low pressure P1 is equivalent to area of the capillary tube into the manometric height H square by V1. So V1 is the volume of the complete from point O to the top, whatever the area of the tube. So this is how I will find out the unknown vacuum pressure by using McLeod gauge. Any doubts in this? Please ask.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, we will input the unknown pressure source at point C, no sir?
Unknown pressure set? What?
At point C, we will input the gas, right?
Correct. We will input
Sir,
the gas.
after moving the movable reservoir, will it close, sir? Will the inlet be closed or open?
It is open to the source only, right? It is directly connected to the source.
Okay, sir.
Otherwise, this capillary tube and this tube, it will have the same. So you may ask, sir, why this tube is bigger? This tube is bigger to take out the effects because of the capillary things. So capillary, because of that, some error may come. To avoid that, for getting the levels proper, we have a thicker section like this. Okay, and we are also taking that assumption that it is an isothermal process where P1 V1 is equivalent to P2 V2. Generally, we take it for the isothermal conditions. So that we will take consideration. The one of the biggest problem is we cannot use condensed gases for usage of this McLeod gas because of these pressures that may get condensed inside. The liquids may condense back into the liquid form, then it will be a problem. So we have to be careful with what kind of pressures we are actually using. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So this is one part that the same thing I have explained in for your notes purpose I've given here. So the same thing, everything is same. The capillary bulb and the opening, everything, how we move everything is explained here from the expressions. So these are all the same expressions. So now here we have given a very simple problem. Now a McLeod gauge has VB, that is the volume of the bulb, is 100 centimeter cube, and a capillary diameter of 1 mm. So diameter is given 1 mm, and the volume of the bulb is given as 100 centimeter cube. So total volume they have given as 100 centimeter cube, and capillary diameter is given as 1 mm. So what they are asking is calculate the pressure indicated by a reading of 3 centimeters. So what is the pressure that we get when there is a 3 centimeter variation in the height h? What error would result if you neglect the gas volume in the capillary? Suppose if you are not taking the gas volume, that is A into H. So what is the error percentage? That means in that expression P1 equivalent to AH square by V1 minus AH, you have to calculate first, and then take out AH from the expression. AH square by V1 you substitute, and then what is the difference or the error that you are getting through that you can find out. Okay, so just can you try to do this problem? So the answer is given as P is equivalent to 0.94 pascals. VB, you know, AH square, area is 1 mm, diameter is 1 mm, H is 3 centimeters. So what do you need to find out is, I think you can do it home. AH square, area is pi by 4 d square, that is the area of the capillary diameter, which you have to convert into centimeters, AH square, and then divided by V1, that is 100 centimeter pipe, minus A1H, you have to put, and another one without A1H you will put. So first find out what is the pressure with AH, and then find out the error without subtracting AH. So that will give you the basic understanding. Similar problem, a McLeod gauge has a capillary diameter of 0.2 mm. So diameter of the capillary is given, volume of the bulb is given. So they're asking you what will be the gauge reading from an absolute pressure of 20 micrometers. Suppose if P1 is equivalent to 20 micrometers, what is the value of H? So P1 equal to AH square, A you know, H square you have to calculate by V1 minus AH. So let us simplify that by taking out minus A1H from the expression, write down AH square by V1, find out what is H. So that is what this problem is. Or you can include that and then you can substitute the same value. Okay, so this is the particular thing. Now, the next thing is the Pirani thermal conductivity gauge. Okay, so this is another important vacuum measurement gauge that we use to measure vacuum. So the principle here used over here, the earlier principle is we are just taking what we call it as a Boyle's law, which is a standard law, and what we try to do is we have a very low pressure, and we try to find out the volume of that low pressure gas, and then by applying suitable amount of pressure, we are increasing that pressure such that it can be easily measured by a manometer, and then we try to find out that pressure, that volume, and then we relate it. So that's what we simplified. Just kind of a scaling kind of a thing we have done. In a Pirani thermal conductivity gauge, the name itself will tell you that it's a thermal conductivity gauge that we are using. So here, what is the fundamental principle here? You have to think the principle is at the pressure will affect the thermal conductivity. At very low pressures, thermal conductivity is will be directly influenced by the pressure, not at very high pressures. But at the same time, it is also affected by the temperature. So thermal conductivity is a strong function of two things. One is the temperature, second one is pressure. Pressure generally at low pressure. So at very low pressures, the effective thermal conductivity of gases decreases with pressure. Okay, so low pressures means low thermal conductivity of a gas. And same way, that low temperature also have an effect on the thermal conductivity. So here we are trying to find out the same thing. In general, we have a filament. Okay, I'm taking a filament over here. Filament means some material which can be ignited. Okay, which can be resistive element. You can take it as a resistive element. So what happens is when you send current through it, because of its resistance, it develops heat. Okay, it tries to develop heat. This filament will try to develop heat. Generally, at a particular wave frequency, if the heat is coming out, we call it as light. Okay, the same principle we will use for our lights and all. So now what is happening is, here we are taking this evacuation gauge kind of a thing, and then in the gauge tube, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put a particular heated filament, a kind of filament, kind of a thing over here, and I'm connecting it to I'm trying to connect it to a source. For example, a simple diagram, if you take, there is a source. Okay, if I have to draw a very simple diagram, what I will do is I will take a source plus or minus. Okay, and then I will send it into a chamber. Let us say this is the evacuated chamber, and this is the filament. Okay, plus or minus. So now what is happening, because the gas inside is at a very low pressure. So what is happening is, at low temperatures, at a very low temperature, at low pressures, what happens? The thermal conductivity of the gas is lower. So that means whatever the heat that is generated because of the current passage through this filament will not be conducted or convected fastly into the gas. Okay, as the pressure is low, the lower the convection of the heat into this one. Therefore, when heat is not going out as quickly, then this temperature of the filament goes on increasing. Okay, so the temperature, whatever the temperature it is increasing, that particular amount of, if you can measure the temperature, so basically the temperature will be directly proportional to the pressure. This is one way. Okay, the more the at a pressure, the more the temperature, the more the pressure. This is one way of looking at it. But for this, we need to put the thermocouples or thermometers, and we can make a discrete measurement, not a continuous measurement. So in order to overcome that, what we generally do is we are using a resistance circuit. Okay, so what do you mean by resistance circuit? We are giving that to a Wheatstone-Bridge circuit which is connected, and I hope you know the Wheatstone-Bridge circuit. We have 4 resistance in general. So you have 4 resistance. Let us not take the reference to. Imagine that this is also a resistance, 1, 2, 3, and this is the 4th resistance. Generally, when the temperature is not there, it will be at a null condition, that is at a 0 condition. When you are sending the current, because of this pressure, when the heat is not going out, its resistance keeps on varying. So that resistance, we are directly converting that into pressure. Okay, so that is the basic measurement process that we follow for vacuum pressure measurement in a Pirani thermal conductivity. The question here is, sir, that is true, but how can we eliminate the temperature? It may be due to temperature also. Maybe at low pressure, the temperature may be a little bit higher. So because of the temperature, again, the thermal conductivity of our gas is varying. So how do you ensure that the both are being taken care of? Now, what I will do is I will have a reference tube here, similar conditions. So initially at the same temperature and without the pressure, we will keep at the same temperature wherever you are measuring the surrounding temperatures. wherever you are measuring the same, another gauge of similar candidate is connected into this. So now the temperature of this filament and this filament is same, okay, and the pressures are also same initially. So therefore, it will set a non-deflecting condition. That means at a zero case. Now we are evacuating. Now we are taking by means of pump or something. We are taking out the pressure from this tube. Okay, the gas from this tube, creating vacuum into this. Now the effect within this gauge is only due to the low pressure, not temperature, because here the earlier we have taken the temperature into consideration. So whatever that is happening is due to the pressure only, not because of the temperature. So that is the use of a reference tube. Okay, so this is the effect of the Pirani thermal conductivity. So as I told you, this simple schematic. So this is a bridge circuit. This is a vacuum space to vacuum space. So this is the first Pirani gauge simple circuit where we have a filament, we are giving power, and then it is getting heated up. The more the pressure, the more the thermal conductivity, the lesser the temperature of the filament. The lower the pressure, the lower the thermal conductivity, the higher the temperature. So based on that, we will create a relation between the temperature of the element as well as the pressure. Now the same thing we have. The vacuum space and the sealed and evacuated. This is for the temperature compensation. What we call it as temperature compensation. What does that mean? That means the resistance is also a factor of temperature. So we should make sure that the measurement is only due to the effect of pressure, not because of the effect of temperature also. That is what we are trying to ensure. So therefore, we are trying to reduce we are putting another similar kind of a what we call dummy apparatus kind of a thing, and then here the temperature and the initial temperature are same. Now we are allowing the vacuum. Now we are trying to take out the air or anything from that system, so evacuating the system, and then the pressure is getting lowered and lowered. Depending on that, your resistance is varying, and that is basically what we are trying to find out. And the resistance variation we are trying to relate with the vacuum pressure. So that is what we call it as Pirani thermal conductivity gauge. So based on the conductivity principle, we are trying to find out the pressure. So the vacuum pressure range is 0.1 to 100 pascals. This is the minimum of this. So what is the limiting conditions that we have in this? Your pressures, as you go on increasing the pressure, the effect of pressures become lesser and lesser for the gas. So you cannot go up to that range. Okay, so that is why the pressure range is 0.1 to 100 pascals, which is very, very low, not beyond that. Okay, as your pressure increases, as the pressure of the gas is increasing, its effect on the thermal conductivity is not huge. It becomes a weak function. So therefore, the limitation of the Pirani thermal conductivity gauge comes from the principle itself. That means at a very low temperature, it is a strong function of thermal conductivity at very low pressure. So that property we are utilizing to measure the low pressures. So don't just remember the principles. What I want you students is, we are having some principles, taking care of those principles and their dependency on the factors that we want to measure. We're actually creating devices. Okay, so that is what the simplest thing, that is what the creativity that you should get, not just by hearting this. The last one is the ionization gauge. Okay, here a schematic of ionization gauge is given. So this is the last one of the three. So with this, we will wind up the pressure measurement. Here, you can see that there is a triode, which consists of a cathode. There is a cathode here. Okay, there is a cathode here, cathode plate, and then a grid plate here, which is positive in nature, positively charged grid plate, and then there is a negative plate here. Okay, there is a cathode, positively charged grid, and then a negative. And these three are inside a gauge where the evacuation is happening. So wherever the low pressure is there, in that it is actually created. Now we are heating the cathode. The heated cathode, what it does is it emits electrons. So these electrons are being accelerated by the presence of the positively charged grid. And as the gas molecules move towards the grid, since they are accelerating, they produce the ionization of the gas. So they try to produce positive ions and negative ions because of the collisions. And all the positive uh, all the positive ions are collected at the grid, and negative ions and the electrons are collected at the plate. Thereby, we are having two types of currents being generated. So the electrons and the negative ions, the electrons and negative ions are collected by the grid. So I'm sorry, it will be collected by the grid, positive thing, and it creates grid current, IG, this current. Okay, so the negative ions as well as the electrons, the negative things are attracted by this positively charged grid, and this will create a current which is called as the IG. Similarly, the plate anode, which is maintained negatively, negative potential, this will collect the positive ions and it produces a plate current which we call it as IP. This IP is the plate current and this is the grid current. So two types of currents we are producing because of the heating of the cathode within a gas chamber, which is actually evacuated. So now the pressure of this the gas chamber or vacuum chamber is equivalent to one, or is directly proportional to IP. You can say that the pressure is directly proportional to the plate temperature. The higher the pressure, the higher this one. The lower this pressure, the lower this plate pressure, plate current, and inversely proportional to the grid current. So the higher the pressure, the lower the grid current. The lower the pressure, the higher the grid current. So it can be written similar to P equivalent to P is directly proportional to IP by IG, which is basically taken care by a proportionality constant, which I'm calling as 1 by S, where S is the proportionality constant, which is what we call it as sensitivity of the gauge. Okay, so this is the sensitivity of the gauge. So its value is generally, it depends on various factors. Its value is calculated to be 2.67 per kilopascal. The sensitivity of the gauge is 2.67 per kilopascals, and its range that we can measure the pressure, low pressure, is 0.1 pascal to 1.3 into 10 power minus 6 pascals. So this is what I can measure from this particular thing. And S is generally found out not taking this whole value for all the values. So generally this for a particular gas, it will be different. So we have to follow the calibration process as we have discussed earlier and try to find out what is the sensitivity of this gauge. And this value we can use here so that you will find out the absolute pressure of the gas. What is the absolute pressure? That is from zero pressure, whatever pressure that we want to find out, that is what we will find. And there is another interesting gauge is there, which is based on the nuclear reaction, that is called the schematic of alphatron gauge. So this is the alphatron gauge. Those who are interested, just go through it. And stopping at this point of time may not be required in the exam. It will not be there. Okay. So these are the three instruments which are widely used for pressure measurement. I hope it is clear. Any questions up to this? Feel free that if you have any questions, feel free.
No, sir.
Yeah, fine. Then we will move on to the next topic. Basically, we'll find out temperature measurement. The fourth module. So with this, we have finished the third module. Okay. So now we are moving towards your fourth module, which is temperature measurement, which is very, very important in terms of for mechanical engineers, especially the temperature measurement, especially the broad. We have a broad classification of thermal engineering. So as a thermal engineer, if you are a thermal engineer, then temperature measurement is one of the basic things that you should be knowing. Should I continue or no? Okay. So let me stop at this point of time. Then in the next class, we will start the temperature measurement. Now, okay, we have time up to 4th, right? So in between, whenever is possible, I'll take one extra class for the last class yesterday. So we will try to wind up this temperature measurement in the next class. Hope you understood the concepts clearly. That's what
Excuse me,
I'm
sir.
just. Yes.
Sir, can you move to the slide of ionization gas gauge?
Ionization. Just a minute. Yes.
Sir, why this the gauge meter for IP is not situated near the cell which is indicating cathode?
Why it will be? This is the plate current, no? So whatever the positive ions that are coming here, that will be coming, that will be transferring to this. So that is the plate current. That is what current which is denoted by this plate, negative plate. Okay, whatever the cathode which is coming out from this is electrons, which is actually bombarding with the gas particles, and then it is kind of taking out the positive and negative ions from the gas. Okay, so it depends on the pressure again. So how much the negative ions will be produced and how many positive ions will be produced is dependent on the pressure of the gas. So that is what what is this expression tells you? P equivalent to IP by Ig. What it tells you?
Sir, limiting current required to stop and like measure the pressure.
Limiting period?
Means the ratio tells like we will provide currents that will stop the ionization means the ions which will be used to measure the pressure.
It will not stop, but what we can say is that is a proportional, there is a relation between the plate and the grid current. That is what it is showing, isn't it? Right. So from this, if the pressure is more, then this current will be lesser and this current will be more. Okay.
Sir, then why additional power is added near the cathode?
We are not providing any additional, we are just heating the cathode. We are giving some current to the cathode, so it gets heated up. So because of that, some electrons, we are giving some extra energy so that the extra electrons, whatever is there, which will leave the cathode, and while moving, this positive grid, what it is there, it tries to accelerate them. Because of this acceleration, the ionization happens within the gauge. Okay, so that creates that the positive and negative ions. So the positive ions are taken care by the plate. So the number of positive ions is creating the plate current, which can be measured by the galvanometer. Similarly, the electrons and the negative ions are collected by the grid current. Correct. So based on these currents, we will be able to find out from this expression. So pressure equivalent to IP by Ig. But yes, you have to be, we have to find out this yes. How do we find this yes? If we know the pressures upfront, you keep on changing whatever by suitable device, you keep the pressure within this chamber, IP, known pressure, known low pressure, or known absolute pressure. For example, 100 pascals you get. So 100 pascals, what is the IP and Ig? You'll find out. So keeping in that expression, pressure, IP by Ig, so you'll get your sensitivity for that pressure. Similarly, you go on varying your pressures, get S. From that, what is the S value you'll find out. So now, when you are using the unknown pressures, you will directly keep the S value over here and find out whatever the IP and Ig, you will get the absolute pressure. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
So what is your exact doubt? I mean, I'm not getting it. So the process is that, and what do you, where you are not able to understand?
Sir, I'm confused with the additional power source added near the cathode.
This is for, see, how this cathode will leave the electrons.
So power is required, sir, to emit.
Yeah, that's what, that is what is given. The heated cathode emit electrons. So it has to be heated up, right? For that, this source is given. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. We will meet in the next class. So apart from this, you have any doubts in LVDT, or I have not explained LVDT in detail. That I will do it in temperature measurements or displacement measurement. But apart from that, all the other things I try to explain. So if you have any specific doubt in any one of the particular thing, you just WhatsApp me so that I can explain you in the next class. Do you have any doubts in the minor exam questions or something like that? Any questions you want to, or are you satisfied with the answers? Didn't you get a doubt? There is one question where the probability for a normal distribution